Hi honey bunnies, welcome to another video from my Self-Love September series. This is a topic that I have been really looking forward to getting into and talking about because it's something that plagued me for a long time on my own journey, and it's probably one of the last things that I actually focused on and fully implemented in my own kind of self-love path. So it's something that's still actually kind of quite fresh for me, and I definitely feel like I'm tweaking my understanding of how important these things are all the time. So I'm by no means done, and I still sometimes have to check myself before I fucking wreck myself. So this is definitely one of the more kind of recent things that I have introduced into my self-love journey. And I've noticed, particularly over the last 6 months or so, that I'm having an increasing number of conversations with clients, with people online, with people who email me, with people on social media, about the dangers of letting your self-love routine go when you have a lot of pressure in your life, when you are really working towards a goal, when you have a really strict deadline or a number of strict deadlines. And it seems that even when you are kind of quite far down the road in your understanding of how important self-love and self-care are, when you get to those big pressure points in your life where everything feels like a pressure cooker and you're really pushing to get something done, you kind of tell yourself that you can like leave aside your self-love routine and your self-care routine so that you can focus more on approaching those deadlines and getting everything done and being really productive. And that's definitely something I used to tell myself a lot. I used to tell myself that the thing that I could afford to ignore, the time that I could afford to save, was the time that I spent with the self-care stuff, the self-love stuff, focusing on my body, focusing on my mind, focusing on things I really enjoy doing. I definitely told myself time and time again, if I've got a lot of pressure, if I've got a lot of deadlines, if the stress is high and I really need to put my full force behind the wheel, the way that I can make up the time, the way that I can get myself more time, is to ignore my needs. Ignore the self-love routine. Just forget all of that. Fuck it. I'm just going to ignore that so that I can get this stuff done. And honestly, it's a really consistent mistake that we all make, and it actually does not lead to being more productive, and it does not lead to reaching deadlines. And that's kind of what I really want to talk about in the context of this video. We've all got a biting point when it comes to how much we can conceivably get done over the course of one day. We've all got a physical biting point, we've all got a mental biting point, okay? And the biting point, the point at which you're going to start to slow down and not be able to be as productive, is massively affected by how much self-care and how much self-love you're putting into your daily and weekly routine. And that is just a truth that after a certain number of years on this planet, you will really come to understand. You will come to understand that you cannot just cut out all of your self-care and all of the attention that you give yourself and then expect to be able to push yourself 3 times, 4 times as far in order to, you know, deal with the pressure or reach the deadlines on time. It's not going to work. In order for you to be as productive as you can during the course of the busiest and most stressful times in your life, self-care has got to be factored in. It's non-negotiable. And I've definitely been that person that's tried to cut it out and just be like, oh, you know what, I don't really need to have, I don't really need to do my workout, I don't really need to do my stretches for my back, I don't really need to go for a walk, I don't really have time to journal, do you know what, forget my ritual tonight, I can't do it, I don't have time, you know, everything is just too stressful, I really need to focus on this. And you know what? It never ever has helped me to be more productive. It has always actually made me feel more resentful, more strung out, more stressed, and I feel like I'm able to get less done. But accepting this is difficult. I'm not saying it's not difficult. It is difficult to accept that you still need to factor self-care and self-love into the routine even when life is stressful, even when there's a lot going on. It's difficult because we all want to save ourselves some time, and we all want to have that single-minded, very concentrated point of focus when we're trying to get something done that's really important to us or that really needs to be completed. So it's very difficult for someone to come along and say, oh, you know, you really can't sacrifice your self-care routine. You've got to keep doing these things that you do to be self-loving towards yourself. It's very difficult to accept that because you want to save the time and you want to focus on where you're aiming to go. So I understand that this advice is frustrating, but I think time after time, people do begin to realise that if they cut out their self-care routine, their self-love routine, in the interest of getting more done, they invariably hit their biting point way sooner. They do not get more done. they actually end up screwing themselves over and getting less done. If you're going through a high pressure time in your life right now, if you've got deadlines, if you've got stress, if you're really trying to push to the finish line on a project that you're doing, if you're in school, if you're studying for a degree, anything like that, then the first thing that I would definitely suggest to you is that you think about what your morning routine looks like. Be really honest with yourself about what the morning routine looks like for you. So many of us are waking up first thing in the morning and we're going straight to the inbox and checking the emails, or we're going straight to the books and hitting the books. We're waking up with the kids and we're getting ready for the school run with the kids, and we haven't had even a moment to check in with ourselves, to center ourselves, to just find our core. And that can be very detrimental, and that can make the biting point for how much you can get done in the day come a lot sooner than it would do if you just had that bit of time to connect with yourself in the morning. Now, this can be very difficult advice, particularly for people that have young children, and I know that it might be quite difficult for you to hear this advice from a woman who doesn't have young children, and I don't. It's true, I'm child free. But I really do encourage even people with young babies, with newborns, to just think about what is going on when you wake up in the morning, or what is going on generally in the morning that you could say is self-loving and self-caring and is to do with you getting into a connection with you and getting back to you. It is so important, and it will allow you to be more productive, more present with whatever you're doing during the course of the day. Everybody veers off course with the morning routine. Everybody does, okay? I have an hour and a half worth of morning routine before I open my inbox, before I start to deal with anything client related. The only times really that the morning routine will be interrupted in some way is if I've agreed to do a very early call start time with a client, in which case the morning routine can still work around that, but of course I need to be with my client for that part of the morning. Or if I really have just already decided I'm going to have a lie-in, you know, if I've been just very, very busy for the weekend, for example, and I've been up in London and I really just need to relax, I probably won't get up so early that I can factor in my morning routine. But I tend to feel like the occasional lie-in is very, very self-loving, so it's fine, you know, I just roll with that. It took me a very long time to realise that a morning routine should be non-negotiable. It should be non-negotiable during the times when everything is chill and calm, and it should also be non-negotiable during the times when everything is very, very pressure cooker and there is hardly any time and you can barely think and you've got so many deadlines, they're coming out of your ears. It doesn't matter what's going on in life, the morning routine should remain consistent. It may not be as long as it has been in previous times, you may need to cut it down, but it's got to be there. And the reason it's got to be there is because it's a touchstone for your energy, and it's a touchstone to set your vibration and set your intention for the day. So without it, like I said, your biting point is going to come much sooner. You're going to feel stressed because you're not going to feel like you're with yourself. You're not going to have checked in with your intention, so you're going to feel lost and fuzzy during the course of the day, especially if things are getting confusing or really high pressure at work, for example. The last thing that you should ever do is go balls to the wall with absolutely no time for yourself. It doesn't help. It really does not help. And I think if you look back over the timeline of your life, you can actually see that when you push yourself and you give yourself no time to actually just be with yourself, even for a moment, to meditate for 10 minutes, to just have, you know, a relaxing bath or a walk around the block. If you have stripped out all of those times because you're convincing yourself that you need to go balls to the wall with this thing, I think it's easy to see how that didn't really help, right? It makes you feel confuzzled and stressed and as though you're just going towards meltdown city. You've got to keep factoring yourself in. So I definitely ask you to think, if you're going through a high pressure time in your life, about whereabouts during the day you're factoring yourself in. Whereabouts are you factoring in your mental self-care, your physical, spiritual and emotional self-care? Are you getting enough time for that? Are you connecting with yourself before you wake up and start to do whatever it is you've got to do with your day? Are you having even that 10-minute little check-in with yourself just to set your intention, or do your affirmations, or just light a candle or burn some incense? Are you getting straight out of bed and dashing headlong into whatever it is you've got to do for the day? And if so, how might that be affecting you? Be really honest about how that is affecting your ability to be as productive as you can be. Every single morning, every single day, we have the opportunity to set our intention, to set our vibration, to think about what it is that we want to bring to the day. in terms of our attitude, in terms of what we want to get done, if we're not giving ourselves those little windows, those little pockets of time, then it's very likely the biting point is going to come much sooner. You're going to get stressed out far more quickly. Try learning how to do a body scan meditation. They can be very quick. They can be, they're super quick and painless. They can just take a few minutes, 3 to 5 minutes. But it's basically where you tune in with your physical self from the top of your head down to your extremities, the tips of your fingers and toes. And you really just check in with how the body is feeling, where there are any aches and pains, if there is any hunger or thirst, for example. A lot of people, when they're going through a super high pressure time or they're working in a very stressful environment, can find that they are not fully connected to the body. And actually, when we don't realise that we're hungry or we're thirsty, for example, or that we're experiencing a tension headache or something like that, we can actually very much attribute the irritation that we're feeling and the stress that we're feeling to our emotions. But really, we're missing the body's signals. We're not listening and checking in with what the body is trying to say. Honest to God, the amount of times that I've been so stressed and ratty and irritable, and when I've checked in with myself, I've realised that I'm thirsty, I'm dehydrated. It really can be the case that your body is asking you for something and you're so engaged, you're so in the zone with what you're trying to achieve that you're missing those vital clues. So body scans can be very useful. If you have a deadline that you're trying to reach, either a deadline that's been given to you by your schooling institution or your employer, or a deadline that you've given yourself for when you want a project to be completed, the best thing to do is to create a slightly earlier deadline, which can be known as the cushion deadline or the padding deadline. And that basically is the deadline that you're going to aim for. That's the deadline that you're going to try to hit. Adjust your mindset so that that first deadline that you have selected and decided upon is the more important deadline. That's the one that you're really aiming for. And that gives you that sense of padding. That gives you that sense of knowing that anything else that you might need to flesh out or perfect afterwards can be done in plenty of time. I really like to know the main deadline but not focus on it. I don't put a lot of emotional investment into the main deadline. What I'm looking at is the cushioning deadline, the padding deadline, and that's the one that I focus on. I do this a lot with things like official paperwork, stuff that needs to be done in terms of accounting and so on. I always look at that padding deadline. I'm not looking at the official one. I'm looking at the one that I've set up for myself, and that's the one that I forge a connection with. And that really just allows me to work towards a deadline and focus on it, but at the same time, in the back of my head, like right at the back of my head, I know that I'm giving myself a little bit more time for anything that might be left over, for anything that might be a flourish that I could add to later, or anything that I might need to perfect. If you are only focusing on one overall deadline for all of the work that you've got to get done, then I would definitely recommend that you watch my video about resistance and self-sabotage. I'll leave it down below. It's a long video, but if you've not watched it, it could definitely be worth your time. If you are working towards one main deadline that you're trying to hit, and it's basically just you and then a stretch of time and then that deadline, if you're finding that you're resisting or you're procrastinating or you're not getting things done, then I would definitely recommend that you watch my video about resistance and self-sabotage. I'll leave it down below for you. It's quite a long video, but if you've not watched it before, it might be very helpful to you. It's basically half an hour that's just packed with tips and techniques to help you to stop resisting and move into action and really kind of stand in the seat of your power. And one thing I recommend in that video is that you create lots of little chunks of time with a deadline for each, and you basically just bite off one very small piece of the overall thing that you're trying to achieve, so that rather than focusing on that great big overall thing that is very daunting and can seem kind of insurmountable, you're actually focusing on the smaller, way more manageable deadline. And that takes a lot of stress and anxiety away when you're just focusing on the tiny deadline. The way that it works is, let's imagine, for example, that your entire floor around you is just covered in stuff that you need to organise. There's paperwork and objects and books and clothes just absolutely everywhere all over your floor. When you look at the entire floor, you're looking at the entire thing. You're looking at the complete job that you need to get done. And that can feel stressful, it can seem insurmountable, it can quickly become overwhelming. So now imagine that you've gotten a piece of string or a shoelace or something like that, and what you've done is you've taken that shoelace and you've actually placed it around a certain little piece of the floor, a certain area of the floor. And what you're focusing on now is not the entire floor, but just that one little area, and that is what you're going to get done between now and lunchtime, just that one little kind of couple of feet stretch of floor. And that's basically the reframing process between looking at the entire insurmountable, overwhelming job that's just making you want to run away and hide in a cupboard, and then looking at that manageable, you know, kind of actionable task that's in front of you for the moment. And that can give you a great sense of empowerment, and it's a very self-loving thing to do when you are feeling powerless, when you're feeling daunted by the amount that you've got to do. Don't convince yourself that you need to approach pressure, deadlines, etc. the same way that somebody else in your life does. Everybody has a different way of doing it, and the sooner you can get a handle on that and allow yourself to find your own way of doing it effectively, the better. My personal feeling is that in adult life there are way too many of us that are convincing ourselves that somebody else is doing it correctly and that we need to adopt their way of doing it. And when I finally gave myself permission to just do it my way and find a way to be inspired that spoke to my core personality, it was a very self-loving thing that I did for myself. And I'm so glad that I did that, because there were other techniques and other ways of doing it that just were not for me. And I was very much like a square peg trying to fit myself into a round hole, and it just really wasn't working. So I encourage you to think about your way of reaching deadlines or working through a stressful or high pressure situation. Think about a way that works for you. For a lot of people, they like to have some sort of public accountability. This is something that people do to reach their goals or to reach their deadlines, is they make it public, they make it known. I know that for a lot of people who are writing novels or getting involved in NaNoWriMo, for example, they use a ticker that they place onto their blog or their website. And the ticker basically shows everybody who visits how many words they've done so far and how the word count is kind of going up over the days. And it's that sense that it's public, that there's that public accountability there, that makes it really inspiring and makes somebody want to keep going back to it. For other people, this is a nightmare idea and they would never want to do it. So take some time to think about how you could potentially use the concept of public accountability. And it may not necessarily be sharing it in an online community. It could be just sharing it with one friend or family member or with your partner. Just actually expressing that you are going to get something done by a certain time and that that is your commitment can be very inspiring. And the people that love you and care for you, that you have asked, you know, to keep you accountable, they will then kind of continue to encourage you and ask you the question, how much more have you done? How much further have you gotten? And that can be really inspiring. You can actually ask a mentor, a guide, a counsellor, anybody like that. You can ask them to be your kind of point of accountability. I've done that for quite a few of my clients. I've basically just emailed and checked in with them and said, hey, how much more have you done? Let me know by the end of the day what the word count is, or how much more you've done with the house, or whatever it is. And it basically just gives them that sense that somebody is checking up on them. And like I said, that can be really enjoyable and useful for some people, not so much for other people, but it is something to consider. Some people love to set up a reward system for themselves, a series of things that they're going to allow themselves to have or experience or stop doing once they reach a certain amount of work, once they get to a certain point on their journey, and that can be really inspiring for them. Some people like to really make a game out of it and challenge themselves and kind of go against the clock. I love doing this. This is one of my favourite ways of staying on task and staying in the zone. I really enjoy using the stopwatch and the timer kind of functions on my iPhone to check how long I've been doing emails for example, and like time myself against the clock, or have a timer that kind of, you know, goes off after an hour so that at the end of the hour I can stop and take a break. But until I hear that alarm, I'm not taking a break. I need to be in the zone. That is really inspiring for me. It's a kind of self-discipline that I can really enjoy, and I can really appreciate it because I've chosen it for myself. And it can definitely give me that healthy kind of pressure that I like, you know. A lot of people motivate themselves by bringing their inner child into the equation. The inner child is a really important archetype. I don't think enough people are bringing their inner child into the equation. The inner child part of you can have a really inspired response to things like deadlines and pressure and really trying to get something done. Your inner child can just make it so much fun. A few weeks ago, I invited my inner teenager to the party when I was really trying to sort out clothes and laundry and just basically get a handle on what was where and packing for my mum's and that kind of thing, and also doing some sewing of clothes that had needed to be repaired for a while. I have like a repair bag where I put things that I love that are well used and well worn and need to have a little bit of sewing done to them. And I basically like rang up my inner teenager and said, hey, like, how can we get this done? How can we make sure that this happens? And my inner teenager was like, okay, well, I want to watch quite a few documentaries during the course of this, so I think we should definitely like watch that Bikini Kill documentary again. I want to watch Afro Punk. I want to watch a series of other punk documentaries. I want to rewatch this. I would like, and it was just basically this list that my inner teenager wanted me to put on in the background. When I was a teenager, I used to love nothing more than spending time in my room, just kind of appreciating records that I had and making mixtapes and just enjoying trying clothes on and being in my space and absorbing and imbibing the culture that meant so much to me. So I kind of thought to myself, how can I make this fun? How can I keep on task? And I was just alone in the flat. And my inner teenager really helped me by saying, like, you know, we can watch all of these amazing documentaries and they can be kind of like your background while you're trying to do whatever you're trying to do. Don't be afraid to create boundaries with people in your life who really need to be aware that you are trying to get something done. And it doesn't matter whether or not it's organising your home, organising your space, trying to forge forward on a new career path, finishing up a degree, doing something that's related to work or related to just sorting out your life. Or even if a lot of stressful situations have just come at once and you're really trying to keep everything together, don't be afraid to create boundaries for people who may be asking for too much of your time, who may be expecting too much of your focus and attention. You don't have to do it in a harsh way, but you do have to be assertive and open. You do have to say, you know, I really do want to speak with you on this and I will do, but at the moment I need to focus on me. I need to bring all of my energy back to self. I hope you can understand, but I'm just firefighting at the moment, and that's kind of how it's got to be. It's amazing how understanding a lot of people will be when you put it to them like that, and when you help them to understand that it's not them, and you know, you're not angry with them, you just really need to put the focus on you. One thing that I want to highlight and stress and underline and highlight and underline and stress again before I end this video is do not under any circumstances tell yourself that your self-love and self-care routines can go out of the window completely until you have finished whatever stressful or high productivity thing you're trying to do. Just don't tell yourself that. Point blank, do not tell yourself that, okay? The self-loving routine that you have in place is the fuel. It's the fuel that helps you to really, really push yourself into productivity and get those deadlines met. If you're not doing anything for yourself, if you're not putting good fuel into your body, if you're not listening to the needs of your body, if you're not giving yourself some decent downtime that you can really enjoy, if you're not getting enough sleep, etc., etc., then you are going to seriously burn yourself out when you try to be twice or 3 times more productive than you normally are. It's not sensible. So don't tell yourself that you can cut that out. Of course, you may need to cut out certain things, like you may need to say no to certain social events or social arrangements because you're really focusing on being productive. You may need to spend less time doing your creative pursuits if you find that something is really calling you at work that needs your attention. But don't tell yourself at any point that there's no room for self-care and there's no room for self-love in any way, because that is just going to make you crash and burn. And like I said, that's something that can be evidenced for a lot of us in our lives. So please, please keep that in mind if you're experiencing pressure or trying to reach a deadline right now. Thank you so much for sticking with me during the month of September in my world, which is completely dedicated to self-love. Don't forget that I put out SoundCloud audio files every Sunday. They are free and they're downloadable, so keep an eye on my SoundCloud account. You can also check out all of my other social media links in the down bar below. If you want to share your self-love story, then you can get it added to the self-love story master post over on kellyannemaddox.com. If you want to find out how to do that, I will leave the video that explains everything below. Please share your self-love story with us if you feel even any remote inclination to do so. Every time somebody shares a self-love story and creates that thread of empathy and understanding and openness and honesty, it's amazing how many more people are healed. It's amazing how cathartic it can be for the person who tells the story. And also I'm getting to know quite a lot of new channels and new people on the internet that I didn't know before from looking at the self-love stories. So it's been really nice to just see new people and meet new people and open my mind up to people's stories that I maybe can't relate to and things that I haven't experienced, and it's been really meaningful for me to experience that. So if you've already shared your story or any thoughts that you've had, any tips that you've got for others and you've had them added to the master post, thank you so much. If you've shared something and you want it added to the master post, and potentially also for me to tweet it out or share it on Facebook, because I'm doing that with a lot of the stuff that I'm getting on the hashtag, please send it to sls16@mail.com and it will basically be available for people to click on and view over on my website. Much love and self-love. Until next time, blessed be.